The Silver Shilling, retold from the original by Hans Christian Andersen. Once upon a time there was a shilling that came shiny and new from the mint. He was so excited at being let out into the big wide world that he shouted, "Yippee! Now I can travel the world and explore." In no time he was being passed on from person to person. Children would clutch the shiny new coin in their warm hands, while the miser would turn him over and over again in his cold, bony hands. Old folks would examine him carefully and hold him so close that he nearly touched their noses, while children would play with their bright new friend and roll him along the floor. Once they rolled him along the pavement so fast that he narrowly missed going down a drain. The perfect round little shilling was made of silver, with the tiniest amount of copper in him. After he had been travelling around his own country for about a year, he was taken on a journey abroad. His master thought he had taken all the coins of his own country to the bank, but the little silver shilling had slipped into a corner of his purse, and he had forgotten all about it. When the man opened his purse to buy a drink at an inn, he noticed the little silver shilling in amongst all his other coins. "Hello, my little friend," he said. "How nice it is to see one of my countrymen in a sea of strange faces." The silver shilling jingled and jumped for joy when the master popped him back into his purse. He tucked himself into a corner of the purse and settled himself there to watch all his foreign friends come and go. For several weeks the shilling stayed in his cosy corner in the purse. Lots of coins would pop in for a little chat, some French, some Italian. In fact, he met so many different coins in the purse that he didn't know where he was. And there's not a lot you can see if you're stuck in the dark corner of a purse. One night the shilling noticed that his master had left his purse open, so he crept up to the opening to have a little peep outside. He knew he shouldn't have done it, but his curiosity got the better of him, so he slipped out while the other coins weren't looking. Then he slid into his master's trouser pocket, where he stayed for the rest of the night. The next morning the maid picked the trousers up, and the shilling fell out onto the floor. For the rest of the morning the lonely coin was shunted across the floor by people's clumsy feet, until eventually he ended up in the entrance hall of the hotel. He saw his master leaving, but there was nothing he could do. A young footman noticed the little shilling on the floor and picked him up. He'd never seen a coin quite like this one before. The footman showed the shilling to a gentleman who was passing by. That's an interesting looking coin, but it's not one of ours. Look at the king's head on it. That's not our dear king." And then the gentleman showed it to his friend, who was standing nearby. "That's bad money," said his friend. "Get rid of it as quickly as you can, my boy." These harsh words went right through the little shilling, and he wanted to jump straight out of the man's hand and protest his innocence. "Surely they don't mean me. They must be talking about someone else," the frightened little shilling thought to himself. But the truth was that they were talking about him, and worse still, they were planning to get rid of him as soon as they could, because he was of no value to them whatsoever. The sad little shilling was passed on to many people throughout the day, and every time he went to a new owner he trembled a little, because he knew they were trying to pass him off as a coin of their own country. "What a wretched shilling I am," said the frightened little coin. "I may be of high quality silver, but I don't really stand for anything. I am lost in a foreign country, and nobody really wants me. Oh, how I wish that somebody would accept me for what I really am. I feel as if I've done something terribly wrong, even though I'm completely innocent." The shilling was passed on many more times, but on one occasion when he came out of the purse he noticed a pair of cruel eyes examining him closely. The shilling knew he was going to be refused and thrown onto the table for everyone to see. Sure enough, when his new master tried to exchange him for a joint of meat, the shilling was thrown onto the table. "I can't accept this," said the butcher. "This isn't a real coin." "Of course I'm real," thought the little shilling. How those cruel words hurt the sad little coin. Eventually, after being passed on to many, many different people, the silver shilling was given to an old woman. He was given to her as pay for her work. But once the old woman was landed with the shilling, she just couldn't get rid of him, however hard she tried. In fact, she thought that the foreign shilling was turning into a real piece of bad luck. The old woman kept looking at the shilling and turning it over. "How on earth am I to get rid of this?" she said to herself. The next day the old woman went into town. Wicked as it may seem, the old woman muttered to herself, "I'm going to have to fool somebody into thinking that this is a real shilling." The old woman went straight to the baker's shop with a silver shilling. She was planning to pass it on to the baker, although she felt very guilty about it. "A loaf of bread, please," said the old woman, and then she quickly pressed the shilling into the baker's hand in the hopes that he wouldn't notice what it was. But the baker was no fool. He noticed what the coin was straight away and flung it back at the woman. "Oh dear," thought the shilling, "she'll get no bread in exchange for me. I feel totally miserable about this." But the old woman took pity on the shilling, and she handled him gently and kindly. After all, he'd just had a bit of a shock after being thrown across the baker's shop. She went home, and when she took the shilling out of her purse, she said, "I won't be able to cheat anyone with you. I'll punch a hole in you so that everyone can see you are not a native of our own country. Perhaps, after all this, you might become a lucky shilling." So she punched a hole in his middle, threaded him into a string, and gave him to a little girl who lived next door. "Here you are, my dear," she said. "You can wear this as a lucky shilling." The little girl was thrilled with her new necklace. She'd never had a lucky charm before. She became so attached to it that she wouldn't even take it off when she went to bed. That night the girl slept with the coin close to her breast. Early the next morning her mother held the coin between her fingers and cut the string that was tied round it. "So you think you're a lucky shilling, do you?" said the girl's mother. "Well, we'll soon see about that." And when she snatched the silver shilling away, he trembled once again. "I wonder what she's going to do with me," thought the shilling. But before he had time to think any more thoughts, the mother took him and left him to soak in a glass full of salts. She left him in the glass for several days until he'd turned green, so that he looked like an old coin. After that, she took out a small piece of putty and filled in the hole in the shilling. Then she rubbed the shilling a bit and declared that she was going to use him to buy herself a lottery ticket. "You're my lucky shilling now," she said. "How uneasy I feel. I might be called a cheat and thrown out, right in front of all the other coins," thought the shilling, when he was taken out of her purse. But there were so many people buying lottery tickets, and the man behind the counter was so busy that he didn't even look twice at the shilling when it was handed over in exchange for the lottery ticket. The shilling didn't know whether anything was won on the ticket, but what did happen was that when the drawer was cleared out, the next day the shilling was laid on one side. The man in charge of selling the lottery tickets was very angry when he discovered that someone had tricked him. "This is a bad shilling that's not to be trusted," he said, and he got rid of the coin as soon as he could. As the months went by, the shilling was passed on to many more people throughout the land. Sadly, most of his masters didn't trust him, and as soon as they had him in their hands, they wanted to get rid of him. Even the meanest of misers didn't want to hang on to him, because the shilling was of no value whatsoever to him. One day a traveller came to town, and he was given the shilling. He offered it in return for having his boots repaired. The coin was dismayed to hear the cry of, "This money's no good." "It was given to me as genuine," said the traveller, examining the coin carefully. Then he smiled. It was a big, beaming smile. No other person had been so pleased to see the shilling. "My goodness," said the man, "this is a coin from my own country. How nice it is to see a good, honest shilling from home. But why did they punch a hole in the poor old thing? I tell you what, I'm going to save you up and take you home with me." To be called good and honest and to be going home after all this time made the shilling feel very happy indeed. He knew he was going to a place where everyone would recognize him and where they would know he was honest and trustworthy. The kind gentleman made a real fuss of the shilling. He wrapped him up in a piece of tissue so that he didn't get mixed up with the other coins and get spent. The special shilling was only taken out on festive occasions when the gentleman came across fellow countrymen. In fact, the little shilling became quite a conversation piece. Some years later, the gentleman ventured home, taking the silver shilling with him. All his companions jingled with joy in the purse when they saw him, and even though he'd had a hole punched through him, they knew he was genuine. The end.